Hello everybody, Gabriel from Gabriel's Guitars here, doing our Luthiery Live, our live webcam show that we do every Saturday at noon Pacific Standard Time. Thank you so much for joining us, and today we've got a couple of repairs up on the docket here. We're trying a couple of new things as far as like trying to add another camera to the mix here as well. I don't know if that's coming through or not, but hopefully it is. So we have a camera on that bench too, so that when Mike is working on a few things today, you'll be able to get a little bit of a better look at it. And yeah, we're here to talk about all things guitars, all things repair. We're building out a couple of things right now, and we're just going to have a good time for the next 2 hours or so. So thank you so much for joining us. Mike is with a customer right now, so he'll be back very shortly, and we should be good to go. Yeah, they'll be a late tax. Very cool. Just checking it out. Looks like these are going pretty well, but I do not have. Looks like our collaboration camera is not actually showing up on the screen here. Oh, here we go. There we go. Hey, look at that. Our collaboration camera over here. Let me adjust the focus on it so that we're a little bit cleaner. Yeah, look at that. Hey, now we've got cameras everywhere. I'm actually going to put this up just a little bit more. I've been slightly too much. My apologies. Still see what's going on the bench. If I have anything on my bench over here today. And we can see what Mike's up to over there too. I'm gonna make that just a little bit smaller. Cool. Sorry, we're still testing out this whole functionality and how we do things here. So appreciate your patience and all that. But yeah, let us know if you have any questions about guitars, about guitar repair, anything along those lines. That's what we're here for. We are your experts in those. Hello, Telecaster Bear. How are you doing today? Where are you located? As I was saying, Mike, our other luthier here, he's up at the front counter working with a customer right now. He's having a little bit of an electronics issue. Oh, wonderful! Have you been to our shop in Tucson before? I probably know who you are and just don't recognize the handle, right? Sorry, we'll get going here in a little bit when Mike finishes up. We just got in a stainless steel refret on a banjo that he'll probably begin today, which is super fun. I think in the Spokane area here, I think we're the only people who are doing any sort of stainless steel refrets at all. In Tucson, there may be one or two places that also do that, but we are, if I may pat myself on the back, I'd like to say that I'd like to think that we do the best work, especially with fret work, available in the Tucson area. Oh, very good Telecaster there. Oh no. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Make sure to follow us on our Facebook and Instagram pages as well. All of those links should be in the information down below. We regularly put out all kinds of promotions and specials, and we of course put out information on what kind of repairs we're working on right now, and other kinds of content as well. So if that's something you're interested in, that's what we do. There's my beautiful wife joining us. Hey, baby. And of course, please do stop in. We have a number of really excellent instruments for sale there, as well as a variety of maintenance equipment and maintenance supplies for your instruments, humidifiers, strings, those kind of things. We pride ourselves on being the experts of what we do. Everybody in my entire organization, everybody with hands-on guitars, is a certified luthier. So I like to say that we're a little bit of a step above. And I think our work, our reviews, our online reputation kind of speak to that. Telecaster, do you live near the shop? We're off of Broadway in Wilmot in Tucson. I know we get a lot of traffic from the surrounding areas as well. We even have quite a bit of business coming up from Sonora, Mexico too. A lot of mariachi players who love their Takamine 12 strings. Hello everybody, I see we've got a couple new viewers in here. We're going to get started here pretty soon with Mike will get started on a repair. I'll be here to talk and answer questions about guitars, guitar repair. If you have questions specific to an instrument that you have or you need a little advice on what to do, how to handle it, that's what we're here for. We may even, I don't know, pick up an acoustic guitar and jam a little bit, I don't know, something like that later. You never know what's going to happen on Luthiery Live. Oh my goodness. It's a wild party. Mike and I are up here in the Spokane shop. We have two locations, one in Tucson, Arizona, and one in Spokane, Washington. We did that for a variety of reasons, but one of the advantages of it is that they are in very different climates. Of course, Tucson is a desert climate, very dry, and up here is also kind of on the drier side, but we do experience a lot more cold up here in Spokane, and more mid-range kind of humidities. And yeah, oh, thank you very much, Telecaster. Yeah, that was we had a typo on our store. Yeah, that would be a great deal for $120, and we did immediately fix that online. Yeah, so it does reflect the proper price of $1,200 now for the Glocky thing. it's a really excellent sounding bass amp. We have that up here at the Spokane location. Yeah, east side. So you must be pretty close to our shop there. So, yeah, as I was saying, one of the other advantages to having the two stores is that we do accept repairs via the mail. People can ship their instruments to us to have us repair. Obviously, for certain things like setups and things like that, doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do that. It's definitely something you want to have done locally. But we do offer our services for the more in-depth things, bridge re-glues, crack repairs, finish repair. We do custom finish work as well. All of that is stuff that we have available in-house, and you can mail to us, and we would mail it back to you. There's a whole thing that we're working out right now to make that a bit more available, and make it a little bit more transparent and easy to do. But that is something that we do offer as well. And essentially, you can choose which store is more like your own climate. So if you're somewhere else in the United States that you're a little more higher humidity, you may want to send it over to our Spokane shop. If you're a little bit lower humidity or a little bit warmer climate, or somewhere in the south perhaps, you can send it to our Tucson location for repair as well. Sounds like there's an electronics issue that Mike is helping somebody deal with right now. An Ibanez sound gear base with an active electronic system that getting a bit of crackling and fuzziness out of a stacked tone potentiometer. That is a fairly common thing to occur. Sometimes it can be resolved with a bit of contact cleaner, but it's never a permanent issue, or it's never a permanent fix when you're using contact cleaner to repair electronics. It may last you a while, and you may be able to do that a couple of times, but eventually the component does need to be replaced. That's just the nature of these components. They are designed to wear out, especially nowadays. And so yeah, unfortunately, this is not just like a standard stacked tone potentiometer, which so like, for example, this is a standard tone potentiometer, stacked tone potentiometer. There's a potentiometer right here on the top, and then this little gold ring down here is also a potentiometer that spins. This is what they look like when they're kind of just a standardized part. However, unfortunately, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, the one in question here today has a preamp attached to it, which is going to be exclusive to Ibanez, which means that we will have to source that part. So that can be a little difficult sometimes, but usually we have a very good relationship with most of the manufacturers out there, especially the bigger brand manufacturers. Most of the time we're able to pick up whatever part is needed from them directly, but of course there's always a second-hand market as well. We take care of all of that for you. If you wind up needing any sort of specialized parts and things like that. We had a situation not terribly long ago where somebody had brought us a pre-Fender Ernie Ball Music Man Stingray bass, and it's a very common issue, unfortunately, that the necks on those things get really badly warped. and it's a very common issue, but it's also something that Ernie Ball kind of recognized and caught early on, and so they wound up basically stockpiling some new old stock necks. And so that's something, because it's a pre-Fender Ernie Ball Music Man, it has a particularly high value. And you know, when the neck itself was just not really repairable anymore, and we're having to discuss the options of replacing that neck, the post-Fender Ernie Ball necks are not the exact same neck profile as the pre-Fender Ernie Balls. And so because of our relationship with Ernie Ball Company, we were able to get them a new old stock Ernie Ball Music Man neck, so that it's not devalued, you know, in any particularly large way, and the customer is able to get a good working bass as well. Pass it for you. 4 strings, 1973 Telecaster bass. Beautiful instrument. Really fun. I've never actually owned a Telecaster bass myself, but you know, they're a fantastic instrument, classic instrument, very popular, of course, in the country world. Telecaster, are you a country musician mostly, or what kind of music do you play? Hey, Catfish Guitars. Thank you for joining us. We still have to meet in person. You got to come down to our shop and bring some of your guitars in. If you have any that haven't sold yet, seem to be doing pretty good on getting those instruments into people's hands. For those who don't know, Catfish Guitars is a local builder up here in Spokane. He builds mostly cigar box style guitars and basses, but a few other really kind of creative and fun styled instruments as well. Very talented builder, very, very popular up here. And keep trying to get him to you know, put some of his instruments in our storefront. I think he wants to. But they keep flying off the shelf so fast, he doesn't have any left over for us. So I guess it's a good problem to have. Sure. Yeah, absolutely, Catfish. So placing a bridge for proper intonation, everything comes down to scale length. So you need to check your scale length, and then you know, which, depending on the type of instrument, is going to be a little different. We use a nice long ruler like this to do so, and basically you would measure from the nut, or from the end of the fingerboard, to the center of the 12th fret, and that is going to be your half of your total scale length. So on a Fender, for example, Fender style guitar, you're going to be at 25.5. Gibson has a couple of different, some of those are 24.5, some of them are like 25.4, depending on how old they are and what era they're from, and that's because it's a metric number is why it's like a weird number like that. PRS guitars and PRS style guitars are 25-inch scale length flat, and basically, so that would be your starting point. So let's say it's just for the ease of the numbers, let's say it's a PRS style guitar, you would wind up measuring from the nut of the instrument to 12.5 inches. Is that right? Yes. 12.5 inches would be exactly where you sit at the 12th fret, and so then you can use that same measurement and go and move your ruler to starting at the 12th fret, and at 12.5 inches is where you would expect the intonation to be set. However, there's this little thing called compensation, and it basically, what it has to do with is how much the string vibrates. So where your bridge sits on the string is where your string, let's say this is your bridge and your string is resting on it. You pluck that string, it doesn't actually vibrate all the way to that exact point where the string and the bridge meet. That's just the nature of vibrations. And in fact, what happens is the larger the string is, the further away from that point that the string starts to vibrate. So depending on exactly how big of a string you need, or the string we're talking about here, is going to depend on how much further beyond that point you need to set your bridge back. For most instruments, you're looking at about 1/8 of an inch, and I always double check my resources on this before I ever actually set a bridge, because it's kind of like, that is the one thing, if you screw up that value, you have screwed up the guitar. So that's when it comes to building, that is like the number one thing. You always want to double, quadruple check that you are intonating, that you are setting the bridge position correctly. Typically speaking, I believe it's about 1/8 of an inch on the bass side, and about 1/16 on the treble. But let me actually pull out. This right here is my Bible. So this is a, it's not really my Bible, but it's a very handy tool that I have from back when I was first learning all of this stuff. And it is a good resource that I come back to. And let me, and this is the other thing, it also is going to vary a little bit on acoustic versus electric as well. So, here's a lovely diagram. And it actually states here on the bass side 7/32 of an inch of compensation and 3/32 of an inch on the treble side. It does also state that there's a range between 1/16 and 1/4 inch. So it's a little bit more important on, 1/16 and 1/8. On the treble side between 1/16 and 1/4 inch, and on the bass side there's a range of 1/8 to 5/16. So on acoustic, it's a little bit more imperative to dial that in. On electrics, typically speaking, there is an ability to adjust that by moving the saddles forward and backwards. On an acoustic, you got one shot. So that's why I always double, triple check those things. So I hope that answers your question, Catfish. Probably far more thoroughly than most people would care, but as a fellow builder, hopefully that is an adequate explanation and answer for you. Been placing the saddles in the middle of the adjustment and placing it spot on the scale length. Yeah, they're probably not really intonating very well then, if that's where you're at. We're running out of adjustment for intonation, mainly on the fifth string. Absolutely, that's exactly what's going to happen. So you want to set the whole bridge back just a little bit further than that to give you more room. On electric, you have a little bit more wiggle room, but you do want to set it back maybe as much as 1/8 of an inch on the bass side and 1/16 on the treble. Telecaster Bear, 62, playing rock and roll, 6 strings since 1975, yeah. I'm primarily a bass player myself, so I'm of course partial to the 4-string. Actually, most of the time nowadays I'm playing 5 strings, so That's, my bread and butter, but I do dabble on guitar a little bit. My brother was the guitar player, and I got into starting playing bass when I was 12 years old because my older brother convinced me to spend all of my savings, all of the money that I had saved up on a bass guitar because he wanted someone to play with. And so I did that because I wanted to be just like my older brother. And now he has completely abandoned music, more or less. It's just like a fun hobby, pastime kind of thing for him. At best, he works in the public sector now. And here I am, 25. How old am I again? I don't even remember. almost 25 years later. And I'm the one who's a musician who works in the music field, and he's off doing other stuff. So, but he did teach me as he was learning guitar. He taught me a number of the things that he was learning on guitar too. So. What's my opinion on coated color strings? They look cool. That's about it. They look cool. I would say that if it's an aesthetic thing, if it's a stylistic choice, great. I think in general they have a little bit more of a muted tone than what I like personally. When it comes to strings, it's always a matter of personal preference. There is no right or wrong answer on what string to choose, what string is best. If the aesthetics of your strings is what you care about, then go for it. And there are plenty of people like that. I tend to focus a little bit more on the tonal qualities, and I also like to choose a string that is not going to break the bank, which is why I really like Diodario for most things. I think they're a really good quality string, and they're inexpensive. They're, in my opinion, the best bang for your buck. But the color-coded ones, there's nothing wrong with them. They probably have a little bit of a longer lifespan because of the coating. But for me personally, I don't really think that they have the best tonal qualities. Good questions today, guys. I'm glad we actually have like a decent discourse going on. So yeah, when are you gonna bring me a guitar, Catfish? Even if you're not selling it in my store, I still want to check your work out. I want to take a look. This is what we luthiers do. How's that Telecaster you're building coming out? Is it all done now?
We still have, when you do a discovery, right, it's 125, but then we're thinking we're going to replace another pot and just the one. That's 35 in the system still.
So it should be 75 for it, because it's not a discovery if we know what's wrong. It's just a replacing of the electronics part. So it'd be 75 for the first one and then 35 for the second.
Okay, I just want to make sure that additional one was 35. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I thought it was all 125 to start.
No, discovery's like, we don't know what's wrong with it. Yeah. So we've got the customer with the electronics issue here has got a couple of lots that are kind of failing on him. So we're just working out the pricing for him. I could agree. I don't see people using them much. Working on a good display model. Until he's almost done. Waiting for little parts, tuner bushings. Yep. The Bell Flats, yeah, it's a very popular string choice. 45 to 105 is a little heavy for my taste personally. I like the 40 to 100s personally, especially for a rock thing. It gives you a little more of a growl. But the 45 to 105s are perfectly acceptable. It's again, it's a personal preference thing. Just make sure that your instrument is set up for them, because and that's really what it comes down to. Anytime you're changing string gauges, you want to make sure that your instrument is set up properly for the strings that you put on it. And once you have it set up for those strings, keep it that way. Keep using those strings, and if you decide that you'd like to change strings, you need a setup. It may be that you put new strings on there and everything seems totally fine, and you're just like, Gabe, you're overanalyzing, you're overthinking it. You're crazy. You don't need to change your strings every single. You don't need a setup every time you change your strings to a different gauge. Here's the problem with that. You may not notice a whole lot of change, but there is a different amount of tension on the neck than what it was set up to be playing as. And that will allow the neck to move, and it'll change over a period of days, sometimes weeks, or even a month or two. That neck will move, and it may move in ways that you don't want it to. And we see it happen all the time. Fretboards develop humps. They develop twists and turns and things like that, all because somebody changed the strings and did not have it adjusted, and it becomes much more difficult and much more expensive to repair the instrument when the neck has gone out of whack. So, highly recommended, if you plan on changing the string gauges on your instrument, get a setup done. It is less expensive for you in the long run to do it that way, and not have the headache of an instrument that does not play well. Yeah. Well, Catfish, before you sell that telly, maybe you could bring it down and we could officially meet, take a look at it. It looked like a fun little build. Yeah, and as far as the coated color strings go, I mostly have seen them in basses. There's bass guitar players that want to add a little extra flair. I think they're just, in general, they're more visible on basses, when you're talking about, playing live and being on stage and stuff like that. The color-coded strings on a guitar, it seems like a very minor, at best, aesthetic choice. So I would way rather just have normal strings and not even think about it. But on the basses, you can see it, especially like when some people use those bright neon green, neon yellow colored strings and stuff like that. It looks cool. Yeah, you definitely got to make sure that that your strings are seated in the nut properly. That is very, very important. Make sure you have a good set of nut files, and that they are appropriately sized for the strings that you're using. For a long time, I did not have like actual proper nut files for basses. I always just used the round file and did it by hand. Did it like something like this. Get that a little closer so you can kind of see what I'm talking about here. There's just a diamond round file, but it's tapered at the end here, so it's thinner at the end and wider at the base. And I would have to just kind of do it by hand and measure the string to sit properly. But when I opened up this shop here in Spokane, I decided, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and get the proper files for basses too. And so I did wind up getting up to 120. This beefy nut file here. Great for bass guitars. Yeah, we got the whole thing's working. We got y'all set there.
We got a Taylor 816 here with the cutaway electronics. This is a very, very high-end guitar. Just kind of just a couple steps down from a built-to-order from Taylor or a complete custom. They have a couple other ones. There's variations of custom shops from Taylor, like any other manufacturer.
Right, right.
And this one just has a rattle going on.
Oh yeah, okay.
So it's not a nut issue. It's not a string or a playability issue. It's something vibrating inside the body.
Okay.
So we're gonna take the strings off and try to figure out what it is.
Sounds good. Catfish Guitars is joining us right now.
Nice. Okay.
And we were talking about a couple different things about setting bridge intonation properly, and also our opinions or thoughts on coated, colored strings. I don't know if you had anything to add to either of those conversations.
You know, I don't like the code. I don't like the colored strings for some reason. Tend to, and they maybe just fixed this, or this was a rare one-off thing with this specific guitar I was working on one time. It seemed to inhibit the string ground a little bit. Not completely, just a little bit.
Because of the coating?
Because of the coating. It was specifically on a Strat.
Okay. I could see that. I could see that being an issue because it's almost like a rubberized kind of coating that's on there.
Yeah. It seems to be more of an issue than like an elixir though. Like elixirs don't seem to give that problem.
So yeah, that is a valid concern though. Like you definitely don't want to have grounding issues going on, obviously, while you're playing. So like, yeah, having some sort of coating over the string would, potentially cause an issue like that. Typically, other coated strings like elixirs or the XS's from Diodario, those are coated, but you can still feel the metal through the coating, and so I think there's less of a chance of that kind of thing. The color coated strings are like a thicker coating, because it's supposed to be opaque,
Yeah, it feels thicker. The other thing too is I think it was maybe the way the guy played. Not necessarily that he did anything wrong, but I think he was only resting his hand on the strings or only touching the strings with his left hand. He wasn't a player that rests his hand on the bridge, so he wasn't getting the string ground connection directly through the bridge probably.
Right.
So, and that's pretty normal. I don't rest my hand on the bridge on a Strat either. On like a Les Paul, something with the Tunematic, maybe I do. So.
Okay. Yeah. Let's see here. Yeah, please do stop by the shop, Catfish. We'd love to meet you. Neon strings are great for punk under blacklight. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
It's a really cool look. Especially, I like. Sometimes you see them on some like really heavy graphics kind of paint jobs. Looks really cool. I've also seen them on some of the acrylic kind of stuff where they put like the LEDs and all that. It's a vibe. It's a cool looking. It's a cool look. It's a cool aesthetic. It actually also looks really sick on just like a jet black instrument. Like having that really super bright, neon green strings on it. It looks really cool. But yeah, I don't think it's a choice being made, for the sound quality.
Well, I think that issue that I ran into was probably a very unique situation. It probably doesn't happen on every guitar that you have those strings on.
I imagine not, but it is still something to be aware of and to be, concerned about, I guess,
Yeah. So this guy, he left the strings, this customer here left the strings a little long. So I'm trying to trim them before I loosen it, so that way it doesn't leave me a nice scratch circle when I loosen it.
Yeah. So what is your thought process on this one? Because we have a rattle going on somewhere in this instrument. We're not exactly sure what it is, but it's not the nut. We know that much. And I guess what are your kind of thoughts? How do you what's your kind of checklist to go through and sort out what it probably is?
First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check to see if the pickup in here is loose. If it's just obvious, it might not be obvious. I might have to end up putting the strings back on, or at least the low E on and tuning it to pitch to hit it, because that was the one that really caused the rattle.
I was gonna say, is it like at a specific frequency that it's rattling, or on only one string, or is it across multiple strings?
It seems to be most dominant with the low E, so it probably is frequency related, and maybe just simply the low E probably moves the most air.
Sure.
And
moves the most in general.
right.
The most amount of vibration.
Yeah.
Or the widest vibration, I should say.
If it's not obvious with the pickup though, it could be also, it doesn't sound like it's coming from back here, it sounds like it's coming from right here. But it could also be something in the jack,
Yeah.
in the housing here,
loosen
that's
that or
just
something
loosened
like that.
up. It could be something we can tighten, it could be something that maybe is a part in the electronic, like the actual connection of the jack, maybe we can blow a little solder to tighten it up. Worst case scenario, we're gonna replace the whole battery box because it just won't stop
Yeah,
rattling.
hopefully it doesn't come to that, but you know, that is sometimes the answer to those kind of situations. You know, one of the other things I was gonna say, I'm sure you probably already checked this with the customer, you know, present, but oftentimes batteries in battery boxes wind up just kind of getting loose.
Yes.
You know, and the battery itself is not a, you know, a really firm fit in there.
Yes.
What winds up happening is, you know, and it's only going to be at certain frequencies. It's only going to be certain things that actually just cause that battery to vibrate and rattle in there just enough to annoy you at certain times. So that's always something that we check for loose connections and things like that. It's unlikely on an instrument of this caliber that there's going to be some sort of like structural issue or structural problem. Although those are all things that of course we have to like consider and you know, but you know, you kind of make a list of priorities when you're dealing with an issue like this where there's this kind of like unknown, you know, what it could be, what could be the cause of this problem. And so you kind of start with the most likely issues, which are going to be mechanical things like nuts, bolts, washers, anything that is designed to be kind of loose on the instrument, or places where there are naturally going to be gaps or could be gaps. So like, you know, the pickup underneath the saddle, and oftentimes you can kind of hear exactly where that rattle is coming from. At very least, you can, you know, kind of narrow it down where something is kind of coming from. So
Yeah, and that was one of the things I did right away was I just took the battery box out and left that completely out. Now, since it's a problem, I was more worried about what's going on here. I didn't realize kind of the situation up here with these strings. When I talked to the customer, after I figure out after I diagnose the issue, if it's something easy to fix, we're gonna fix it obviously. But if it's something that we need to replace the part or whatever, we'll go from there. But we're gonna recommend that he's gotta put new strings on. I might not even be able to get these strings back on up to pitch without them breaking anyway, because they just weren't installed properly.
that's a big thing that we are advocates on, and we are happy to instruct and show you if you're ever curious and if you don't know how to change your strings like a professional. That's fine. You know, we didn't at one point either, but we're happy to show you how to do it properly because it makes a difference. It makes a difference for tuning stability. It makes a difference for safety, which is kind of one of those things. Like, I can't tell you how many times when I was younger, I you know, my fingers were bleeding because I kept, you know, poking the ends of my fingers on the ends of my high E and B string.
When I played guitar, I'm getting a
Yeah, right.
Or get my blood checked.
Right, exactly. But there's no need for that. There's no need for there to be any sort of sharp, pokey things on your guitar at any point in time. It's not only better, but it's also you know, safer and also easier to change your strings properly. To be honest with you, I find anyway.
Yeah.
Once you kind of learn how to do it, it's a pretty simple little process there, and you know, just takes a little know-how.
You know, it's one thing to have a little bit sticking out or something, but yeah, to have a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch or something that get you.
The one that always bothers me is the people who don't cut the strings at all, and they like tie it into a loop, you know, on the headstock.
Oh, yeah, I can't stand that.
I mean, it's fine. It's, you know, you're not going to poke yourself on them, you know, for the most part, I think. But and it's not like it you know, you can't have a perfectly stable tuning situation that way. It just bugs me the way it looks and and the way it feels. I feel like I'm going to bump into things with it or get caught on something.
But when you take them off, make sure to trim it first, because again, it might give you that nice swirly.
Right.
Well, that very unnice swirly.
Right.
This one looks like it had broken and then got wrapped around an old string that was broken also.
Oh yes. Please fully remove your previous strings before adding new strings to your guitar. I don't know. That's something we see every once in a while, and it doesn't make any sense to us to like leave parts of a previous string in your in the hole, and then just stick a new string in there. Do you need a needle nose?
I got it, maybe. No. Matter of what, oh, here we go. I'm just gonna have to cut some stuff.
Out of your face on the camera.
There we go.
There it is. There's the one.
That's, yeah, I'm just gonna have to replace this strings.
It's unfortunate. We do, you know, most of the time on a lot of things we can keep the existing strings, but that's the other thing too. When they're installed poorly, it makes it very, very difficult to actually save the old ones.
And these strings, I think, could have been played a little longer too.
So yeah, so Catfish is asking, what do you think of the method of string through the peg, wrap it around, back over itself for a lock? Yeah, that more or less is exactly correct. And we do have videos on our YouTube channel as well as on our TikTok and everything, just showing examples of how to properly install strings. So feel free to check those out. But yes, basically you want to stick, and Mike, when he gets around to it, you know, later as he's stringing this back up, he'll show you how to properly do it. But basically, yes, you stick the string straight through the peg, and then you wrap over, you know, with the inside of the guitar string, so the neck side of the guitar string. You wrap that over the top of the peg. Creates a loop, and then you wind it down from there, which winds up trapping the excess of the string between the top loop and the bottom loops, or the top wrap and the bottom wraps, and that creates two things. That creates a lock, where basically that string is now trapped between the top and the bottom, and it also creates an even wrapping all the way down, which is better for tuning stability. And actually, a third advantage to it is that it creates a proper angle off the back of the nut downwards towards your peg head, which is what we call a dangle angle. And it's important to create a good downwards pressure on the nut, which helps tone transfer from your strings into the neck of the instrument, gives you better tone overall. So yes, that is exactly what we recommend doing. And the only important thing is that to keep in mind is whether you have all of your strings on one side of the headstock, or you have a 3-and-3 orientation so pegs on either side of the headstock. When you do your wrap over the top of the peg, you want to make sure that the string exits that peg towards the inside of the guitar, and whether that's either 6-in-line or 3-and-3 configuration, it always works the same way. It always should exit your peg head to the inside of the neck, And so, like I said, when Mike is at that point on this guitar, he'll show you the proper way to do it. Yeah, it's a very simple thing to get used to doing, and it will increase the lifespan of your strings. It will give you better tone transfer. It will give you better tone. It'll give you better tuning stability. That's the one I was looking for. Just an all-around better way of doing things.
Okay, so on the I'm not sure all the levels of tailors. They put the newer ES, they call it the ES3 expression system, where it uses, instead of using an undersaddle pickup, it uses the same technology of a transducer that works off pressure, but it actually puts pressure against the back side of the saddle here instead of the bottom of the saddle, and it uses like a cam basically, or an eccentric that you can tighten it. It just puts a little force against the back of the saddle. And the advantage of that is if on an undersaddle pickup you tend to get your B strings too loud, and so you can adjust each two set of strings, your low E and your A, your D and your G, your B and your E separate, so you can get it as even volume as possible. Now, I noticed that this was not actually all the way up inside. It wasn't quite pushed all the way up. So that may have been the issue.
Yeah, allowing some sort of space to potentially cause a bit of rattling. I was going to say, checking along the same lines, if all of those are in fact snug and firmly up against the saddle. If one of them is loose, then that could also be causing a rattling.
Correct.
So yeah.
Yeah, I was sitting the top of the screw here was sitting about a little less than a 16th of an inch down from, and then when I pushed it up, it just came up a little bit. So it may be possible it had just rattled down, like Gabe said, just got a little loose in there. So we're gonna see if maybe pushing it all the way back up and then adjusting the pressure on the pickup there fixes the issue.
And if not, at the very least you ruled that out. Though,
yeah, exactly.
So all small little things, but oftentimes rattle. It's going to be something small. It's going to be something you would think is fairly insignificant. Catfish asks, do you get a lot of customers blaming the peg for tuning issues when actually it's the way they're wrapping the string? Yeah, that definitely does happen. But not only for tuning issues. A lot of times, tuning machines, people want to change them out because they feel that whatever they have on there is inferior, or they want the new fancy tuning machine because they're so much better and they've got the better gear ratio and whatever else. And that's fine, like there is some of the newer things that come out, having a nicer gear ratio, or having like staggered heights and things like that. They do work better and they are more comfortable. There's a new innovation, I guess, in tuning machines where they have staggered ratios now as well. So basically, on your low E string versus your high E string, some of these tuners, to tune up a whole step is going to be exactly the same amount of a turn on the low E versus the high E. There's a really cool innovation, and something that is entirely new to the guitar world in the last couple of years here. All very fancy, all very cool stuff, but the reality is, even really cheap tuning machines generally do a pretty good job of keeping a guitar tuned. They are not particularly complicated or fancy pieces of machinery. They are a little gear, open back, closed back, whatever. They all do a pretty good job. I would say that generally speaking, when you really start to need to think about changing your tuners is when they get so stiff that you can't tune the instrument well anymore. And that tends to be on very old instruments. Even at that, a lot of times there are things that can be done to repair the tuning machines. They're not particularly difficult things to take apart and and fix. Sometimes, over a very long period of time, the gears themselves have not been well maintained, and they have not been oiled, or they have not had lubrication added to them, and they wind up starting to grind each other down. It's like it's like a motor, or any motor or any engine. Like if you don't have the proper lubrication, it's going to start to grind itself down, and you wind up with like little pieces of metal flaking off in there, and it prevents it from having a smooth action. Even that said, they're still repairable. You can find another gear. You can oftentimes you can just clean them and then add new lubrication, and they work fine. That's a very handy thing to keep in mind when you're doing like restorations on old guitars. You don't necessarily need to find some new old stock 1950s Gretsch whatever specialized tuner. You can usually just take apart the existing ones and fix them up, and just get them working like new again. The other thing that I would suggest, the other time I would suggest probably changing your tuners is when they have bent. That is a situation that's not really ever going to get better, and trying to bend them back will probably cause them to break. So you're just kind of SOL on those situations. But yeah, to go back to your question, do we get people blaming that? Yes, all the time. Is it usually the tuning machine? No. More often than not, I would say the most common reason is that the string is binding in the nut, something like that, where they put a different gauge of strings on there, or the guitar was not set up properly to begin with, and the nut was not either the nut was not carved correctly with the correct nut files, or they put a different gauge of strings on there than what it was carved for. And now the string slot in the nut is not wide enough, and so now we're getting binding. We can either carve that down, we can add some graphite lubricant. There's a variety of different things that can be done to fix those kinds of issues. But if it is a tuning machine that is causing tuning issues, it's hard to miss that that's the cause. It's pretty obvious when you start to tune it, or start to turn the tuning machine, that something's wrong with this tuning machine.
Yeah, if it feels gritty or hard to turn, then it's the tuning machine. The tuning machines turn fine and all that stuff. It's like 9 times out of 10 it's the nut.
Yeah, and also a lot of people don't realize that most tuning machines, especially nowadays, have an adjustment on the side of them. They have a little screw on the side that allows you to adjust how tight they are, and allows you to change. So one of the things that we do is when we're doing our setups is we go through all of your hardware and make sure everything is nice and tightened up properly. But also, if you have one string that your high E string is really easy to turn, and your A string is like really tight and hard to turn. One of the things we do is we go through and we adjust those so that they all feel even across the tuning machines, and it's just more comfortable. It's more predictable, especially in a live music situation. The less things you have to think about and worry about on your instrument, the better. So.
This guy's got a lot of oxidation on the frets.
Okay.
So we're gonna have to restring this anyway, and I can't let it leave the shop like that. So we're gonna go ahead and do some steel wool here. I have it like this, so I'm trying to keep as much of the steel wool that drops off. Inevitably, it's gonna get on my bench, but I'm trying to keep as much as possible off the bench. And being very careful that I do not drop the guitar, of course. And
don't drop the guitar.
Yeah. And then I'm gonna
electric tape back there.
Go out of the frame for a second. I'm just going to blow it off real quick with the compressor. Just keep that dust away from this is the clean area, as much as possible.
will say, when it comes to luthiers judging other luthiers, probably the number one thing that I look at and look for is how clean their workspace is. That's one of those things that, like, you can't fake that. And oh, I've got some sort of slapback echo card.
I muted my microphone, so it shouldn't be me.
My boy. We're both on one microphone here, so I'm wondering maybe where that's coming from.
Mine's muted over here too, so.
Yeah. I'm wondering if
while you're done with that, I just want to mention this. Don't throw away your strings. We recycle them.
yes.
All of them. It's better for the earth. It's a Diodario program.
It's not only better for the earth, which is of course like a major motivating factor on that, but also it helps to keep the cost of strings down with Diodario. One of the reasons we saw a huge spike in string. Okay, I think it must have just been a glitch then, guys. Some sort of because I didn't actually do anything to change the echo. I think it must have just been like a glitch in the stream. Yeah, so we saw with the recession that occurred recently, and we also, over the last couple of years, costs of strings have gone through the roof, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that the cost of nickel specifically has gone up a lot. So recycling your strings is one of the big reasons that Diodario did not actually have a spike in prices when most other string companies did. It's because they have this program; they're able to reutilize, old strings, and able to get a lot of their material costs down that way. So we have a display in our front room in both of our stores in both Tucson and Spokane, where you can come and drop off your used strings. And we then basically, eventually, once we have enough, we pack them up and we send them off to this recycling plant, basically, that is just down the street from the Diodario manufacturing plant. They have an agreement with each other, and they melt it down and put it back into raw materials and then hand it over to Diodario, and they get to reutilize those strings. So doesn't cost you anything. But save your strings, bring them in, recycle them. It's good for everybody.
As you can see, this is a very beautiful piece of ebony. Not the black stuff, but it's got the stripes in it.
Oh yeah,
I
beautiful.
personally love that.
I've never understood. I've never understood the most expensive ebony is always the darkest, blackest ebony, that it's like perfectly black, and I guess it's a little bit more rare, and that's why it's it costs more. But I've never found it to be all that desirable in my own builds. I like the wood to have a little bit of a unique kind of coloration and something that makes it a little more individual and different. Just having that perfectly black board, it looks cool. I mean, it's neat looking, but I don't know. It's not individual. It's not like. I feel like especially if you had like two tailors where like their process of manufacturing is so uniform that like you would never be able to tell your guitar from somebody else's. Your 514 CE from somebody else's 514 CE. You'd never know unless there was some sort of variance in the wood.
Right, and back. I guess it was like 2012 or so. Taylor actually bought majority share owner of the biggest. I don't know if it's the only ebony mill in the world, but the biggest ebony mill in the world, and they're the ones who put a stop to that. What they used to do, and this is a crime, they used to go down and cut an ebony tree. If it wasn't all black, they'd leave it on the ground and go to the next tree, just let it rot. Now Taylor stepped in when they bought it. And they said, nope.
You're getting every tree that gets cut down is getting used. Tough luck. It doesn't matter whether it's all black or not. You're getting ebony the way it was intended to be, with color.
Well, ebony. I mean, there are so many countries in the world where their native ebonies are now illegal to cut down because of such horrible logging practices that have occurred over the past year. I mean, I have a big slab of Madagascar ebony, which it's not the same thing as Macassar ebony, which is still available. Right. Madagascar ebony became illegal probably about 15 years ago now, and it's because it was over forested, and it's this huge chunk that I have that even when I bought it 17, 18 years ago, it still cost me several $100s for this chunk, and I could probably get, and it is jet black, right. I could probably get, I don't know, 7 or 8 fingerboards and a couple of head caps out of it. Back when I bought it, it was a $400 chunk of ebony, and nowadays it'd probably be 3-4 times as much for that piece, it's just kind of crazy. I remember buying ebony fingerboards blanks at Gurion Guitars Warehouse in New Hampshire for $10 each. Jeez. Yeah. I mean, I imagine back in the day there was very, very cheap to get a lot of these things, and now it's you can't. I mean, not only can you just not get some of the materials, but a lot of it is very, very expensive. But I do think that there's been a much larger focus on sort of ethical logging, forestry. Yeah,
it's Taylor's huge on it. That's their thing,
Well, it's very important in this field. I feel like you have to be kind of knowledgeable. I mean, especially when we're working in these kinds of fine and exotic woods and stuff like that. A lot of the things that we work with regularly are they're expensive because they're rare, and oftentimes they're rare because they've been overforested or because they're just rare in nature.
Yeah, the tree grows really slow.
Yeah, I mean, if it's a hardwood, it's because it grows slow, And one of the reasons it's hard to find, big long chunks of ebony is because it's a very slender tree, first of all, in the way that it grows, and so to get a piece that's big enough for like and it curves and goes all different directions, so to get a nice long straight piece of it is really difficult to find, even just in nature it's hard to find, Then now we're also looking only for jet black versions of that. Now, I mean, you wind up wasting so much of the tree just trying to find that one little section of it that's good for making guitars.
I'd like to give a shout out to our favorite cleaner here. It's naphtha, which is basically lighter fluid, but
industrial lighter fluid.
Yeah. It won't hurt anything. It's great for cleaning goo off or whatever. Won't hurt any finish. That's what that was. I just want you to know I'm not putting anything like acetone or whatever on the guitar.
Yes, always be very mindful of what you put on your guitar. Thank you so much for stopping by, Catfish. It was really nice having you here today.
Thanks, Catfish.
Yeah. So, what is it? I had the classical style stamped steel open gear type can be adjusted better fit. Yeah. Well, that was when we were talking about the machine, the machine heads. Yeah. Yeah. It's incredibly important for us to be very mindful of where the wood comes from, and I think just in general in the way that I choose to run my business as much as I possibly can, I think it's impossible to be like perfect in any of these things, but it is a worthwhile endeavor to try to do the best you can for within your industry, and to know the sources of the materials for your industry. So I try to be mindful of where we get our wood from, and only support companies that are also mindful of where they get their woods from.
It's just kind of important because these things, I mean, we talk about this all the time, is that, like, you want to talk about, it's getting harder and harder to find the materials that are classically the materials to build guitars out of. And people are building guitars out of, quote unquote, stranger and stranger woods. I mean, you can build a guitar out of anything, but, the classic tone woods and things like that are getting harder and harder to come by. And probably within the next, 15, 20 years, things like even Indian rosewood. I mean, it's a very, very common and a wood that there's a plethora of right now. Probably will not be that easy to get in a generation. So, one of the other things that I do try to do also is I keep very good relations with some of the old timers, as it were.
Yeah.
A lot of these guys, bought a lot of wood back in the day and stored it, and they just never got around to using it. There's a guy that I've known for a long time in Tucson. He's a builder down there. His name is Bob Mick. Builds some really beautiful instruments, especially his basses are just absolutely gorgeous. And we have a couple of his instruments in our store, in fact, in Tucson. So, if you ever get a chance, please go check him out. I know he just built a couple of Pine Telecasters as well. Really, really beautiful instruments. But he has he's getting up there in age now, I guess, and he's kind of realizing he has more wood for more guitars than he could possibly build. And so there's been more than a couple of times where I've gotten a piece of wood or a top for an electric or whatever from him, because he's got the nicer stuff, and otherwise it's going to go to waste, and we work in trades and try to do things where we're again trying to prevent new wood from being cut down unnecessarily by utilizing the stuff that's still around. So.
And in certain woods, they're already when they started harvesting them, some of the newer tone woods, they were already doing it in a environmentally friendly way. So those should be good for lasting generations, because it's more like a farm, and they replant in the proper way. You can't just replant however.
Right.
It's got to be a certain way. And they do basically kind of like a rotation where they're gonna cut these trees that are older, and then they're gonna plant, and they're gonna let them grow to full maturity and let them live a normal life, basically.
Yeah, I mean, there are woods also to keep in mind that, like, especially in the acoustic realm, that, like, there is no shortage of spruce in this world, and that's because spruce can be grown quite quickly.
Yeah. Yep.
It can be grown very quickly. But if you look at spruce from like the early 1900s, the grain on it is incredibly tight. And that's because it was growing. First of all, the environment was colder 100 years ago. The earth has warmed up a little bit since then. And so what winds up happening is the tree grows larger faster now. And those grain patterns get further and further apart. Which is not good for instrument building. The tighter that grain pattern, the stronger the wood is, and or the stronger the tree was, and it's because it grew slower. Nowadays, you really, unless you're cutting down old growth trees, which is illegal in most places, you're just not going to find spruce that has those kind of qualities. And again, you're looking at purchasing either new old stock kind of stuff, or you're looking at, finding wood that was cut down 100 years ago to buy. And that stuff is extremely, extremely expensive. But you can get, newer spruce, and it's inexpensive and everything. It's just, it's a much lower quality wood that you can get nowadays compared to what existed before. So, Telecaster Bear, buying ebony fingerboards and stuff. Have you experimented with building some instruments of your own as well, or? check in. How's that going for you over there so far?
Just contact the customer about the strings.
Okay.
So whether they want to put our strings on or if you'd like to bring some by real quick. But I cannot finish diagnosing or repairing it until I have the strings because
Right.
I think that's what it was. This pickup was not adjusted, so it was not putting tension against the saddle, and I think that was the rattle issue because it's kind of loose in there. So I'm thinking that's the issue. But I can't test that until I put strings on it.
Fair enough. Yeah. Okay. So, so yeah, and that is something that we kind of pride ourselves on here very much so as well, is that we keep very good communication and open contact with our customers. We make sure that little things like this, where we weren't expecting to have to put new strings on, okay, but we do now. Those are things we're going to notify the customer and let them make a decision. We're not going to just do something without, the authorization of the customer. So we communicate primarily via text message here, but also by email sometimes, and we have that all integrated with our system essentially, so it makes it very, very easy to get a hold of a customer. They can quickly say yes or no in a text message, and we can keep moving. We also notify when the instrument is ready to be picked up. That's also how we communicate. Typically, we send out a text message with the notification that the instrument is ready, and you can even pay with through your phone. Use Apple Pay, Google Pay, whatever, to pay the invoice. Also, of course, pay in person is totally fine. And we try to add a little bit of technological advancement into this whole thing as well. I like to say we're dragging the art of Luthiery kicking and screaming into the 21st century. No more just some old dude with a pad and pencil, writing out a receipt for you at the end of the day. So
It's
cash only.
yeah. So you can see this guitar has a wood pickguard. I'd like to point out the smart choice here of grain direction. So no matter if this pickguard, which it probably will, move separate from the top because the top has finish on it and this doesn't, it won't split the top because the grain goes opposite, almost 90 degrees opposite. It's about 45, but
Very smart.
it's very smart choice. Of course, we expect something like that from Taylor or Martin or anybody who's a high-end manufacturer.
In their higher end market for sure.
Yeah.
There's a lot more attention to detail paid to those kind of things. That's a very smart, wise choice. And additionally, one of the other advantages of it is that's typically going to be the direction of a strumming pattern as well.
Yeah,
So like
yeah.
if you do wind up scratching up your pick guard with a pick by playing, that you're not going to notice it so much on that guitar because it would blend right in. So very, very smart.
Okay. He just customer communicated with us, said go ahead with the strings. Just want to make sure that it's what he wants. We're going to put the strings on and get this fixed up.
Cool. Beautiful piece of wood.
Yes. Yeah, I think they put a taper in this hole here, kind of like a peg.
Yep.
And so as you push it up, it gets a little tighter. So it might also be that it just needs to sit up a little bit. But once we get the pressure on the saddle, that should kind of wedge it in there too.
Cool.
But I'm not 100% sure that was the issue was, but it did feel a little loose.
A little loose, yeah.
And it doesn't take much to get a rattle inside the body. It can just be a hair loose.
Well, the strings vibrate at such a fast rate that it can, even a tiny little bit of motion and wiggle room for any piece like that, it can cause a buzz or a rattle. So. Has anyone ever asked you to fret an originally fretless P-bass neck? I've never had to do that. It would be a very expensive thing to do. Let me put it that way. more often than not, what you would want to do in that situation, and what the wiser choice would be, to be honest with you, would be to purchase a second neck. And that happens all the time. We actually have done that a number of times. Is that you get a second P-bass style neck that has frets, and then you dial in the nut action for that, and then you can switch back and forth between necks for fretted or fretless. But fretting a previously fretless instrument would be kind of a nightmare, because you would actually have to remove the fretboard from the instrument to do so. I would recommend doing it that way, just because it would be too unreliable to get really perfectly straight fret slots. I feel like doing it otherwise. So you'd have to remove the fretboard. You would then have to cut that and then replace it, and there would probably have to be quite a bit of finish repair in doing something like that. It would be a very extensive and laborious task to do that.
I'll show this real quick here.
Yeah.
Little. So what I did is we put the string through. I don't know if you guys can see that at all. So how much slack is there? There's a way that we used to do it at the store I worked at. Put your hand you pull it, not super tight, but about there. I have a little bit more than that, but you put your hand about there and get it, not super tight, but all the way through the eye, and pull it in there. That makes sure you get usually about enough. A little more wrap is better than a little less, but it's 2 to 3 on the bass strings, and it's about 3 to 4 on the treble strings. And what we're gonna do here, and you don't have to do it this way, this is just the way we do it, is I kink it here and here opposite, so that it can't come out, and then I wrap this over and then under, and I will go ahead and make sure that the rest of the wraps go underneath that first one, and then underneath the extra string here that's sticking out. And I will just keep tension on it with my hand. There's as many ways to skin this cat. You just want to make sure they go on clean and even, so that way when you're done you get a nice, and we can get that in the picture here. You can't see that, but on the lower string we'll be able to see it. I'll show you once I get them all on there. Nice and clean wrap. Most guitars it doesn't matter, but it is good to keep the pegs in the order they came out. Most guitars it doesn't matter. On a real high-end instrument where they're actually fitted and not slotted on something like that, you really want to do that, because they might actually be fitted slightly different depending on which string, because the variation on the size of the string. I worked on a Jeff Traugott one time, and he actually had notched in the number of the string for the peg, so you couldn't forget. So peg 1 went to string 1, obviously. Very neat little trick. Jeff Traugott's one of our. He also graduated from Roberto Vin and apprenticed under John Reuter. Makes beautiful guitars. And John Reuter is one of those guys who can. Has a huge assortment of hardwoods that we also like to get wood from every once in a while. He's one of our mentors. All right. Put these strings on. When I'm putting the strings on, always, note the feel of the like Gabe was saying earlier, the feel of the button there. If it's too tight to turn, loosen it up. If it's a little loose, this one was a little loose, so I'm just going to tighten it a little bit, but not tight, just enough to where, it's just a little too loose there. There we go. If they're too loose, they can also cause unwanted wear because there's slack in the gear there.
Sorry about that. I had to step away for a moment. I had a customer that is interested in purchasing one of the guitars we have in the store here, so I was just tending to that. Yeah, so many have had the. It's not all that difficult to change a fretted bass into a fretless bass. It is sometimes difficult to do that well, but we're very capable and competent in doing that. But that was the Jaco Pastorius thing. That's what Jaco did to his own bass, and a lot of people, rightfully so. They absolutely idolize and want to emulate him. And so that does happen quite a bit, but said the perpendicular side edge of the fingerboard is already in the trash bin. Is that what did it like chip off or something or?
Yeah. Customer or it might not have been latched. I'm gonna check.
I think that's.
Oh, hello.
Good.
How's it going?
Sorry about that, guys. We got some customers in here. We are a real live working shop, so we do occasionally have to step away for a moment. Mike's gonna handle that. So yeah, so you're saying part of the fingerboard has already been kind of ripped off, I guess. No, I was referring to the chore of fretting. Oh, yes. Gotcha. Referring to the chore of fretting the fretless neck. Yeah. Yeah. I would not. I would not really recommend attempting to actually fret a neck that's already made. I mean, when we're building, instruments from scratch, you fret the fingerboard long before you attach it to the neck. Even just much cleaner and better way of doing it, and you do it with flat sides. Let me show you what that looks like. So this is a neck that we're building right now. This is just the neck blank itself. It's a nice quarter sawn piece of maple. That we're gonna have a Fender style Telecaster basically kind of neck, and this is the fingerboard for it. And you notice that it's completely flat on both sides. It's parallel sides, and that makes it much easier to cut these frets perfectly parallel to each other. Once it's already on the neck, then you see that we've got this added issue of the taper of the neck that makes it very difficult to get perfectly perpendicular frets. So unless it is not attached anymore. So. Fretless is not for this old man. Yeah, I always pretty much have played fretted instruments for a vast majority of my life as well, and I've built even a couple of fretlesses. One for myself, I have a 5-string fretless that I built 15 years ago. So if you go check it out in our Tucson store, be kind. Be kind to me. It's not exactly like the best example. It's a beautiful instrument, and especially from afar, it's a beautiful instrument. But it does have a few errors and things, and it's been used quite a bit. But that is an instrument that I have, a 5-string fretless that I built in the Tucson store, and you can go check that out and play it if you'd like. But that was a very fun instrument, but it's difficult for me to play it too. It's one of these things that it's not playing fretless is not exactly my forte, but I found that just forcing myself to use it with some regularity actually did make it a lot better. Actually, kind of a fun thing, maybe 10, 12 years ago, I was in this metal band, and I thought, one day this would be fun and kind of dumb if I try to play this like prog metal with a fretless. And the first couple of practices, it really sounded terrible because I just was hitting wrong notes everywhere. But eventually you kind of, the one with the F hole, that's right. So I was hitting wrong notes everywhere, trying to play that. But after a couple of practices and after a couple of times getting used to it, you got better and better and better. And actually, at a certain point, I was, playing it fairly exclusively with them because it allowed me some extra kind of stylistic choices and stuff. So it's a pretty interesting instrument, and I don't have a fretless really anymore right now, but I would definitely consider doing that. I probably would go with a 4-string fretless for my next build for myself, though. I pretty much primarily play 5 strings, but getting rid of rattle on a fretless 5-string is a little difficult, and realistically, I don't think there's much of a need for that low B on a fretless, at least not in the kind of music that I've played. But yeah, it's really that bass is a fun instrument. It's got a belly carve to it, so it's the profile of the bass. If I was to hold up it on its edge with the butt of the guitar facing the camera here, the instrument curves like this to kind of accommodate the belly, as it were. I used to be a much bigger man than I am now, and I'm still not a small man, but I was a lot bigger before, and so it was much more comfortable to play that way. It also has a couple other fun little things. It has like an inset Neutrik jack, which is a locking jack, so that it, if you trip over your cord on stage or something like that, it's not going to come unplugged. And beautiful, beautiful woods I used to make that bass. It's a really nice oil finish, but yeah, just hadn't really been using it much for a long time. So yeah, I think, and to be fair, I think that it would be considered that. I think I was around before them, maybe. But yeah, that's my headstock, my classic headstock for my basses. So when I'm building a bass, that's what I put on there. For guitars, I have had a couple of different headstocks over the years, but my electric headstock is more like this now. So this is on a Stratocaster style guitar, but and this is all black, of course, and we're still in the middle of finish work on it. But this is more or less the shape of my electric guitar headstocks. It's got this little bevel here. It's a little hard to see in the black. I'm trying to get the light to catch it just the right way. There it is. There, you can kind of see it now. Kind of a neat little bevel that tapers as it reaches the end there. So, yeah, and I like this design. I think I'm probably going to wind up kind of sticking with this. It's simple, but it's also effective, and I should say for 6 in a line headstock. This is more or less what they look like now. So yeah, this is for a fun build that we're putting together. This one goes with this body that we put together here. This is just about to go into the spray booth. So it's a Stratocaster that we're building out. This is something that we do. We have a couple of instruments like this where we hand out these instruments to local artists, and we basically say, do your art to them, have fun. What we do, then they hand paint these things, and we then take them back, finish them. We work with a local pickup builder who custom builds some pickups for us to spec, and then we assemble them all, make them play really, really nicely. And you essentially get a custom instrument for less than a true custom instrument would be, because these are essentially kit guitars. But it's well put together by luthiers who know what they're doing, with custom electronics, so they are very high-end sounding instruments, and they are completely unique. They are one-of-a-kind instruments by actual artists, and you can see the artists actually signed their name right here as well, so this will be available within the next couple of months. Here we're gonna spray this and get it finished out, and we already have the electronics for all this as well. Really, really beautiful instrument. Here's another example of that. And this one is a little bit further along in the finished process, but a very cool Telecaster that we're putting together here. And this again is hand painted with a really cool design motif. This one is going to have sort of this frosted chrome or frosted nickel kind of hardware on it. See, we haven't done our finish sanding or anything on it yet, but it does have a number of layers of finish already on it. And it has a neck that matches it in design. So this still has the tape on it, but you can see on the back here, pretty cool. And the way that it comes together, and this has this is the artist's signature right there as well. And what happens is when these instruments sell, we then split the commissions between ourselves and the various artists that worked to create them. So it's kind of supports the local arts community. It also gives these kind of semi-custom instruments for less than would be a truly custom instrument, but they are completely unique and one of a kind, and they play great, and they sound cool. This one's getting a set of kind of broadcaster pickups in it, so should really play nice and beautiful. So I'm looking forward to having this one up and running for sure. That one is also gonna have a see-through pick guard, because we didn't want to hide the artist's work on that. We thought it was pretty cool. So the hardware will be this kind of frosted chrome, but the pick guard will be clear.
This customer has a broken headstock situation where like it would need like the spline thing. I'm recommending what I do.
Okay.
Would you okay that for the same price as the spline?
Yeah, I think so. I have the splining in there as separate kind of thing, right?
Yeah, it's like a $500 charge. So
yeah, I think that's probably about where we're at though, because it's roughly the same amount of work.
yeah, honestly, the amount of time it takes to set up the jig and all that stuff, you're
Probably about the same.
about the same. It's really the finish is what takes the time, and you got to do finish on both. So
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's the way to go. Do they have the instrument here or no?
They don't, but he showed me a picture of the break. It's like that short. It's really short break,
Yeah.
but they'll bring it back.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, you okay.
Yeah, so Yeah, so and actually those are both from Tucson artists. Our spray booth is up here in Spokane. So yeah, right. Splining time. Actually, in this case, we're not going to be splining it because of how it broke. We're recommending basically doing a back cap, is what this is called. So what you do is you glue it back together, but then you take a couple thousandths of an inch off of the back of the headstock and put a whole new cap across the entire back of the headstock to bring it back to the correct thickness. And it adds new wood, adds quite a bit of strength to the whole joint, and then you overspray the whole thing so that it blends right in. You'd never even know that anything happened, and it's a very, very strong way of fixing a broken headstock in especially tricky situations where it broke in just the wrong place and in just the wrong way. So very specific repair for when that's required, but every once in a while that's the only way to do it. So yeah, so as I was saying on those instruments, those are both from Tucson artists. So those, once we actually have them finished, we will be shipping those back to Tucson for sale in our Tucson location, and we are hoping to do some of that kind of stuff up here in Spokane as well in the near future. This location only opened in November, so we're still kind of getting to know the local arts community and such. But hopefully that is something we get to do up here too. And certainly, if anybody knows any artists that might be interested in doing something like that, that's something that we hope to continue to do, going forward. Did he say he's probably going to be back later today, or?
He said he's only going to come back for a couple weeks, but he's definitely going to do
Okay.
it.
Cool.
I think it'll be a great way to showcase our new spray booth.
For sure.
It's
Yeah.
a black guitar, so it will test the buffing technique,
Yes.
and I have no doubts that it will come out perfect.
Sounds good.
All right. Yeah, it's weird. It keeps creaking over there.
Yeah.
I think we need to get some of that. Get some more of that. Get some weather stripping in there. I don't know if that'll help that much, but figured weather stripping around the doors and maybe some that insulation on the bay doors. All right.
Okay.
Any more questions?
Well, it's just Mr. Telecaster Bear here
Okay.
joining us at the moment. So
You only
But-
play Telecasters, or do you like any other styles of guitar?
are we from? It said are we originally from Washington State? No. So actually, I'm from Arizona originally. I grew up in the Phoenix area, but I've had a store in Tucson for the last 16 years now, but we a little over a year ago opened up a new commercial location down there. That previously was I did have a commercial location many years ago, and had been working out of my house for many years, for about a decade. Last year, a little more than a year ago now, but we opened up a commercial location there in Tucson, and that's where I've been for the last 18 years or so now. And then I just recently moved up here to Washington. That store, of course, is still going strong in Tucson. And Mike here, he and I met when we went to Luthiery school like 17 years ago or so at the Roberto Venn School in Phoenix. And he lived in California for the last 15 years, more or less, and had been working there at a couple of different stores and a couple of different situations. But when I moved up here and opted to open up this location, he and I had remained friends for the last, ever since school, basically, and I was looking to have somebody else that I trusted working on instruments, and he was available. So yeah, that's how we wound up opening up this store.
When I was putting the strings on this Taylor, just the D was the one I noticed the most. The peg wobbled a little bit with the bushing, so just snugging them up. You don't want to tighten them too much, you'll crack the lacquer.
Just a light hand tight.
Yeah, you gotta be careful.
He says he used to be Les Paul Deluxes all the time. He had a 1968, 73, 75, 76, and a 1980 Deluxe. A lot of people. The 68, I'm sure. Do you still have the 68? That's a valuable instrument these days. And the 70s ones are getting more and more valuable every day. A lot of people, like to kind of poo-poo the 70s Gibsons, but they're still very good instruments, and I think they're getting more and more expensive as time goes on here, because it's getting harder and harder to find the even further vintage stuff, and of course price exclusivity for the older stuff, and so now the prices of the 70s stuff, same to be said on Fenders too. A lot of people don't love the 70s Fenders stuff, but it's starting to go up in price and get much more popular now, because it's all people can get. As far as vintage goes. I think I had I don't remember exactly what year it was. I had, maybe it was an 82 or an 83 Deluxe in like this wine red that, but it was, a transparent wine red.
Right.
That was a really excellent guitar. Very, very heavy, though. Even heavier than most Les Pauls are. They're all gone.
Yeah.
68 had been stripped to natural before I got it. Did have the original P90s. Yeah, the finish. For me, I'm a function over form kind of person, no matter what. The finish on something is... for me, really does not have a whole lot of weight. I care whether or not it plays well. My feeling is if I don't like the finish, I can always strip it and put something else on there.
Yeah, but not having the original P90s, that's a shame.
Oh, he said he did have the original
I did,
P90s.
okay.
Yeah,
Thank
the
God.
electronics, that's a big deal for
Yeah,
sure.
that's
the money right there.
the heart.
Oh, you got a 68 parts Tele bass, nice. The 73 Tele bass and a 77 Telecaster and a parts Tele. Solid. Yeah, that's a nice lineup. Well, I'll throw this out to you too as something else that we offer that might be a really cool option for you. Just another thing that kind of separates us from the pack a little bit, and one of these kind of advancements like I'm talking about, dragging Luthiery into the 21st century. We do offer a subscription service called the Players Club, and basically it allows you, the idea behind it was to basically allow you to have a single instrument taken care of like optimally perfect throughout the year, and it's just on a subscription basis, and you save a little bit of money by doing that. But you can use it however you'd like. A lot of people do like to use it on multiple instruments. And what it includes is basically for the cost of 2 setups, you would get 2 setups, but also 4 string changes and discounts on any additional services you might have with us. So 10% off any other services, 20% off any other setups you might need throughout the year. And then we also do offer express service, so same-day service on setups and minor electronics work. We do that where as long as you bring the instrument in to us before noon and give us a heads up, we can make sure that we have it out to you before the end of the day. That's normally a $35 upgrade, and that's free for members. And then additionally, we do also offer specialized pricing on any of the gear we have in our stores for members as well. So something to consider, especially since you have a few instruments there. If you were looking to have somebody take care of them for you, we do that, and it would be a good way for you to save a couple bucks in doing it. So
Sure. So, I think my diagnosis was correct.
oh, that's good.
I noticed when I went to tune the guitar, at first I was like, I'm going to use my little fancy clip-on tuner. And then I thought, wait, I should use the electronics. When I went to tune it, it wasn't picking up some of the notes. So I adjusted the pickup, and voila,
There you go.
it started working. So more than likely that was the issue. It's not doing it anymore. I assumed that the pickup had lost its snugness because that taper hole, it needed pushed up a little bit, and then not having the proper pressure against the saddle, it was loose.
Yep. There
So
you go.
it was just a quarter turn. These are very sensitive. We're gonna have to plug this into obviously off camera. We're gonna have to plug this into a real acoustic amp and adjust the volume separately though. But for now, it's picking up through my tuner, which it wasn't before I adjusted, and it's not rattling or buzzing or whatever term you want to use. Sympathetic vibration that's unwanted. Excuse me.
Excellent. Cool. So, problem solved on that, Taylor. Yeah, with these flat saw and fender necks. Yep.
Oh yeah.
They should stay. They probably will move around a bit on you. So that's why I use quarter sawn. It's a little. I don't know if it quite pick up on that.
Even on maple, I prefer the quarter sawn.
For sure.
Something I also noticed. Sometimes it seems like bird's eye is a little less stable than just a plain grain.
I mean, it makes sense that
Sometimes.
it could be.
Not enough to probably matter.
Yep, those will move around on you. And honestly, being in Tucson, the big consideration for needing to have a bit more service more regularly is the fact that we have that monsoon season, because it's so dry there all the time. The monsoons come in and suddenly our humidity is through the roof and things move around quite a bit. And then also our winters down there are very wet oftentimes, which is kind of a weird thing. There's a lot of motion that happens in instruments. Dr. Mike to the rescue for sure. Thank you for stopping in, Telecaster Bear. We really appreciate you stopping in. We're about to wrap up here ourselves, we really appreciate you stopping in. Be sure to come check out the store in Tucson. We would both of our luthiers down there. That's Chuck and Jacob. Occasionally we have a gentleman by the name of Keegan in there as well. He's also a luthier. He does a little bit of contract work for us from time to time when we've got a little overflow. And all of them are very knowledgeable, very, very nice guys, and they'd be happy to hang with you for a minute or to show you what we're up to. Yep, that's about right. Yeah, you as well, Telecaster. Have a great day. I think we'll go ahead and wrap up here as well. Thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate everybody who stopped by, asked your questions. It was really nice talking to everybody today. And we'll see you again on next Saturday.